Ladies and gentlemen, Secretary of State, good morning and a very warm welcome to you all to Day 2 of Renewable UK's 36th Annual Conference and Exhibition. It is my very great pleasure to welcome and to introduce our keynote speaker, who doesn't need much of an introduction to many of you, I know, the Right Honourable Edward Davey, Member of Parliament and Secretary of State for Energy and Climate Change. Secretary of State, it's great to have you with us once again, and that's not only because we're all looking forward to hearing from you, but because it gives me the opportunity, on behalf of the renewable energy sectors we so proudly represent, to thank you wholeheartedly for everything you have done for us in the last 2.5 years as Secretary of State. And we'd like you to convey those thanks also to the team that has supported you during that time. And so, ladies and gentlemen, the Secretary of State was appointed in the very early days of electricity market reform, and he has worked tirelessly to shepherd it through while also leading the UK on climate commitments. So now that EMR arrangements are largely confirmed or timetabled to be so, we have just another 6 months to work together in the battle for hearts and minds right across the UK, and making the case for renewable energy as clearly as possible as the next general election approaches. Secretary of State, I'm not the only one here, very much looking forward to hearing what you have come to say to us this morning, but we also want very much to work with you in the run-up to the election, and I'm just going to invite you now to join me in giving the Secretary of State the warmest possible welcome. Thank you.
Maria, thank you for those warm words, and particularly thank you for what you said about the team at DEC. I'm immensely proud of them and be very privileged to work with them. And for me, it's great to be back at the Renewable UK Annual Conference. First, to help celebrate the many successes over this last year for the industry, to celebrate your contribution to energy security, to celebrate your contribution to the economy, as we saw in the video. I didn't see very much of it, actually, but the video we saw about jobs, growth and investment, green growth and green investment. And, of course, to celebrate your contribution to meeting our environmental responsibilities to the planet, reducing emissions, tackling climate change and protecting our quality of life. And I want to address each of these successes today, but I also want to talk about the politics of renewables. Because, as Maria said, we are now approaching a general election, and it's the time for politicians and parties to make commitments and set future directions for the next Parliament and beyond. And I'm clear that if we're going to meet our legal obligations for decarbonisation, if we're to meet our energy security needs, and if we do so in the most cost-effective way, the 5 years of the next Parliament must see a continued rapid expansion of renewable power. More onshore wind, more offshore wind, more solar, indeed more technologies that are less mature but are coming on fast, particularly tidal. The next Parliament must continue to map out with ever greater certainty the 2020s and the expansion the next decade will bring to the British renewables industry. But let me start by reiterating this current coalition government's commitment to renewables, and my personal commitment too. We trebled the support available to 2020 as part of the levy control framework. Cumulatively, the levy control framework will be worth almost £40 billion between now and then. I believe there are few industries in the UK that have the certainty and stability we provided through something like the LCF, so I hope the renewables industry and its investors will rise to that. You are doing. Over this last year, we've moved to cement the framework for our renewable energy future, first at the European level. The 2030 Energy and Climate Change Framework, agreed last month in Europe, is ambitious. But it's also realistic, it's fully achievable. A target to reduce Europe's domestic greenhouse gas emissions by at least 40% by 2030, That's a target that our research suggests will continue to require a major expansion of renewables here in the UK and across Europe. And it's backed up by a European-wide renewables target of 27%. That combines flexibility for member states to judge their own power mix with a strong long-term signal for your industry. And I'm really proud of that low-carbon deal. It was only possible because the UK helped lead the debate, and only possible because we engaged with other climate-ambitious European countries in the Green Growth Group that I established nearly 2 years ago. And this UK-led drive in the EU is already paying off globally, with today's climate announcements from the US and China. A global deal next year in Paris is now game on. For your industry, this new European 2030 policy provides additional certainty and will underpin British law, especially the targets we set out in our carbon budgets. For I was also pleased to announce in the summer that we have maintained our course, kept to our climate change commitments, and confirmed the fourth carbon budget at its original level. People had speculated we would go soft on our climate change targets and revise the fourth carbon budget upwards. We didn't. So by the period of the fourth carbon budget, 2023 to 2027, Britain will continue to have to up its low carbon game still further. And I remember when we last met, the energy bill was going through Parliament. It's now law. The 2013 Energy Act represents the biggest revolution in our electricity sector since privatisation in the early 1990s. It establishes the world's first ever low-carbon electricity market and the most comprehensive, long-term, legal and financial framework for cost-effective energy decarbonisation anywhere in the world. A framework that recognises that despite significant cost reductions, we still have more work to do on costs, and so it incentivises further cost reduction for mature renewables technologies alongside helping to develop the new, less developed technologies. When I spoke last year, there may have been some who doubted that we could deliver on our timescale for electricity market reform, but last week I published an update on EMR. And to date, we have met all of our project milestones. That's thanks to the DEC team. In April, I was able to announce 8 major renewable energy projects that have been awarded investment contracts. They will provide for up to 12 billion of private sector investment under the Final Investment Decision CFD allocation. And today I can confirm we are on target to run the first auction for Contracts for Difference by the end of the year. And I'd like to dwell on the first auction of CFDs, for we are going to auctions faster than originally envisaged. For some in the industry, that early introduction of competition has been scary. But you have to remember that my job is to look after the electricity bill payer just as much as it is to bring on vital new renewables. So it's a balance. Not every project will get through. Newspapers may write about offshore wind projects being dropped, for example, as if something is going wrong. But we never envisaged, nor indeed wanted or could afford, for every project to succeed. There is no bottomless pit of bill payer support for low carbon. Setting a budget, as the UK has done, forces an ever greater focus on cost. It supercharges the competition we want, and it's a mark of policy success, not failure. Collectively, we do have a task to speak more loudly about the cost reductions and innovations being achieved. For some reason, the newspapers don't always talk about your cost reduction successes. Well, how many people outside this hall know that raw solar PV costs have plummeted by almost 2/3 in recent years and are projected to fall much further? More importantly, for these industries represented today, how many people outside your industry know that onshore wind is the cheapest large-scale renewable, and that onshore wind is set to be even more cost competitive by the end of the decade? How many people know that the offshore wind industry is becoming more and more efficient the more deployment rolls out, and that the offshore wind industry has a credible pathway for major future cost reductions? We need to tell people about these successes. So we need to make the case for renewables based on past and future cost reductions, but we also need to make the case for renewables because they are vital for the UK's future energy security. As the Foreign Secretary Philip Hammond said recently, renewable energy sources will be critical to reducing our vulnerability to energy supply shocks. For we have had a salient reminder this year from President Putin about what can happen if you are over-reliant on any one provider and any one fuel. You can be held to ransom. Thankfully, the UK is not exposed to Russian energy blackmail in a way that some of our partners in Europe are. But we must heed the lessons. We must make the best use of our own natural resources. Homegrown renewables, as part of our diverse and flexible energy mix, have a crucial role to play in future-proofing Britain's energy security. And of course, we must also continue to make the argument for renewables based on economic growth. We've seen £29 billion of investment in renewables since 2010 alone. Electricity from renewable sources has more than doubled since 2010. And renewable power generation and renewable investment are both set to keep on growing. Average annual investment has doubled this Parliament compared to the last. We are attracting more new build renewable asset finance than any other country in Europe, behind only China and the USA globally. With this kind of momentum, I am confident by 2020 we will more than meet our medium-term objective to supply at least 30% of our electricity needs from renewables. But the key economic challenges and opportunities for Britain from our renewables energy strategy go beyond this investment record. I've been determined to build up Britain's own supply chain in renewable power, to attract more global investment, and to position a stronger UK renewable supply chain for the global market. The decision by Siemens and ABP Ports to invest in new manufacturing facilities in Hull was a massive step forward. And I'm delighted that MHI Vestas Offshore Wind have today announced the first part of their UK industrial strategy. This will involve, subject to orders, serial production of their 80-metre blade from their factory on the Isle of Wight. Yet our tasks go much further still. That's why in May, Matthew Chin of Siemens was invited to undertake an independent review of the UK offshore wind supply chain. Matthew's report and recommendations are published today. I'm very grateful to Matthew and all those who contributed. It's clear from his report that we do have already a good story to tell. The perceived wisdom is that profits from UK offshore wind are spent overseas. In fact, over 40% of lifetime costs of a UK wind farm are dispersed in the UK supply chain. And UK capacity in the offshore wind supply chain is growing, so we can grow that 40% proportion still higher. But that is a challenge for both government and industry, working together, for example, through the Industry Council. For building this strong supply chain that we want, we'll need a lot of partnership between local players. The Centre for Offshore Renewable Engineering Partnership, the CORE Partnership, works to provide the best possible support to businesses choosing England as an investment location. Their new prospectus, launching this week, sets out the capabilities of key areas in England to host offshore wind companies. We need to see more of this. We also need to continue to draw on expertise in other countries, to learn, to collaborate, to drive down costs. That's why I'm pleased to announce that the UK has led the successful bid for more than €10 million of European funding to help finance demo wind. This is an innovation competition for collaborative offshore wind demonstration projects between UK businesses and counterparts in Denmark, Spain, Belgium, Portugal and the Netherlands. We're also partnering across government to leverage economic advantage from our renewables programme. Today's UKTI Offshore Wind Investment Organisation are publishing this guide for investors. It's a unique collaboration between UKTI, the Green Investment Bank, the Crown Estate, our UK, and the Offshore Wind Programme Board, and it sets out why the UK is the best place in the world for doing business in offshore wind. But of course, what really gets me excited, I'm sure it excites you, inspires many of us, by this successful investment story is the number of jobs it's creating and the people it is benefiting across every nation and region of the United Kingdom. So it's great RUK are launching their Faces of Wind Energy campaign today to help boost the numbers of young people thinking about the renewables industry as a career. The pilot of a new online career mapping tool can help guide young people through the options available in your industry. An RUK State of the Industry report, also published today, estimates there's been an 8% growth in jobs in the wind sector in the last year alone, with almost half of your members planning to take on more staff in the next 18 months. So renewables are a great British success story. Yet despite all this, there is concern about the future, consternation in some places, and I understand why. Despite all the progress, from last month's 2030 package in Europe to the tumbling costs of solar and wind, the politics of renewables have been turning ugly. From onshore wind to solar farms, the political voices against an expansion in renewables have become ever shriller. Now, some of these voices are complaining about a specific renewables project in their area. That is their right. And I respect reasoned opposition. Indeed, not every renewables proposal will be appropriately cited. It is right that some are turned down. Yet we are seeing other political voices driven by less honourable motives. Populism, vested interests, anti-science. If we are to win the politics of renewables, as I believe we must and will, we have to face down those voices. In part, that's about winning the public argument. Much of my speech today has been focused on rehearsing the many arguments in our favour. And it is very reassuring to see the opinion polls that still show large majorities in favour of renewables, solar, offshore wind, onshore wind, and so on. Far larger majorities than any other energy form. And I want to pay tribute to the industry for working with government to go the extra mile to win that argument, with everything from new, more generous community benefits to the work done by the Shared Ownership Task Force. RUK have been a star in that partnership working. We've developed together an approach that reaches out to local communities, and I believe we are winning the argument on the ground, despite vocal minorities that we still witness. But it's vital that politicians at every level of government, from Town Hall to Whitehall, recognise the huge benefits renewable investment brings. If politicians use their powers in ways that undermine this investment and which do not stand up to scrutiny, then they should pay a heavy price for the jobs they are destroying, the growth they are stopping, and the community benefits they are preventing. And I say this to my Conservative colleagues. If, as a matter of policy, you set the Tory party face against onshore wind, the cheapest of all renewables, you will be making a mistake of historic proportions for Britain. For global investors, reading newspaper headlines don't distinguish between onshore wind and offshore wind, between solar farms and renewables more generally. They simply see a hostile and risky environment, and they will take their money elsewhere. And of course, without onshore wind as one part of Britain's low carbon mix, tackling climate change will be more expensive and the cost to consumers far greater. And without onshore wind, the contribution of renewables to energy security would be considerably cut. And there are worrying signs that this Tory hostility to onshore wind is spreading to solar too. Which renewable will be next? Will it be offshore wind? Now, we all know that the Conservative Party is in a collective panic over UKIP. All these latest Tory green wobbles may be explained by Nigel Farage. But for a party of government that seeks to govern again, that's not nearly good enough. You can't treat a business like that, you can't treat an industry like that, and you can't treat Britain's economic future like that. So I make this call today. Just as all the main political parties created an impressive consensus for the Climate Change Act in the last Parliament, Just as we have created an impressive coalition for the 2013 Energy Act in this Parliament, we need for this coming general election to create a coalition for renewables. My party, the Liberal Democrats, remains an unswerving champion of renewables as a key part of our future low-carbon economy. Our manifesto will include a commitment to use the powers I put in the 2013 Energy Act to set a power sector decarbonisation target as a further strengthening of Britain's low-carbon regime. We will take forward everything from tidal power to community energy in our efforts to build on the huge achievements of your industry during this Parliament. And we will end the current policy of the Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government calling in and recovering onshore wind projects from the Planning Inspectorate. Without our involvement in this coalition, I don't believe together we would have made the progress we have. So as we approach the next election, all parties need to make clear, do they stand with your industry for renewables future, for a coalition for renewables, or do they stand in the way? Friends, we can't duck that question any longer, however difficult it is. But I promise you this, I will continue to do everything I can to rebuild a consensus around the politics of renewables. Thank you very much.
Secretary of State, thank you so much. It was very direct, very unambiguous, and once again, four square commitment to support, for which we are very, very grateful. I wasn't expecting that the Secretary of State would have time to take questions from the floor today. I came prepared with one or two just in case, but he is actually wanting to take some questions and to give you a little bit of time to phrase some, and I do hope that we get one or two before the close of this session. I just want to touch on something else you mentioned. I'm very pleased that you mentioned the Renewable UK initiative of Faces of Wind Energy. And it's an initiative that some of you might know a little bit about, but I'm sure nobody knows everything. And it centres upon a series of short videos and a larger number of interviews which are posted on our website. But just so that you all get a little taster and an understanding of what it's about, we have arranged to show a short, one of the videos now, I hope. That's the plan. Well done.
Renewable energy for me is basically, it's just about hope, it's about how we need to live our lives, it's just about moving forward in harmony with the environment, be a part of a movement of people that really feel like we can make a difference. Hi, my name's Rosie Better, I'm 30 years old and I work in the renewable energy industry. I'm a senior environmental consultant working for a company called AECOM based in Leeds. AECOM are a global consultancy who work in everything from transport to energy. In my role, I manage a team of environmental specialists. When a developer identifies a site that they would like to potentially build a wind farm on, I would send people up onto the site to look at all the different environmental impacts that that wind farm could have on the location. We'd monitor the birds on site, we'd look at the hydrology on site, we'd look at the ecologies, whether there's any badgers on site, if there's any protected species, and also we'd have landscape specialists to have a look at what the wind farm might look like in the environment once it's built. And once we've pulled all that information together, we then put that into an environmental statement which gets submitted to the planning authority, and then they decide whether the wind farm should be developed. I just instantly thought that it was something that was really important for the future of, energy generation. I did an undergraduate degree in biology, then I did a master's in environmental management. My master's degree looked a lot at the impact of climate change. I've always been hugely passionate about the impacts of climate change and climate change in general. And the wind industry, for me, is something that's fossil fuels to clean energy. I think the most rewarding part of my job is knowing that I'm doing something that's worthwhile, and I really believe in this technology. I don't think I could get out of bed and go to work if I didn't actually believe in what I did. Just get involved. I think if I was starting again, you know, I just want to learn as much as possible about all different types of renewables, onshore wind, offshore wind, marine. Just try and learn as much as you can, and you'll soon fall in love with it, I think. The reason why I'm in this job is because I'm passionate about the environment. So for me, that's what sets it apart, knowing that you're actually doing something that's hopefully going to make a difference in the future, and hopefully actually is really worthwhile.
I shouldn't have thought it possible that anybody would be able to add to the enthusiasm I already have for the job we do and where we're going. But Rosie's definitely achieved that, and I'll bet you I'm not the only one here who has been even more motivated and more inspired by that video. So I'm sure you'd all be delighted to know that Rosie is with us. I want to say a big thank you to her. And while I invite her up to the stage to meet the Secretary of State and have a photograph, I'd like you just to show her how much she has inspired you.
It's great to see that passion. I share it, and it's what most of us talk about. Good campaign to be part of.
And so, we do still have the microphones. Actually, I thought it was a good idea yesterday to have a little bit more light in the audience as we move into questions. Is that possible, please? Yep. Well, while you do that, is somebody moving towards the microphone? So there's questions all over the place. It's just I can't see you very well. We start with Merlin here. And then there was another hand over there. I'm sorry, I don't recognise you, but we'll get to you in a minute. So I'm doing Merlin first, then over here, and then to our chairman at the front. And okay.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you, Secretary of State, for that inspiring speech. You picked up on the shared ownership initiative that you've led, and I was pleased to serve on that task force. A lot of interest out there, and I think a lot of from developers and how that's going to work in practice. I was just wondering if you might say a little bit more about your kind of vision of how that might develop over the next year or so.
Well, thank you, Merlin, and thanks to everyone in the industry who was part of that task force. When we launched it earlier this week, what was interesting in what people were saying was the process of that working together in the task force had exposed people to new best practice. And people within the industry were learning from other people in the industry about how to take communities with you. And that's really why I've been focused on it. We've had the community benefit protocol, but shared ownership also speaks to some of the concerns that some communities have, that this investment is something that's done to them by people who are simply, they may be on the other side of the world and they're just interested in making profit. And even if people don't take up the offer that will come through the proposals in the shared ownership task force, at least they've been asked. And that's a very important change in the dialogue and the relationship between the developer and the community. And the fact that the task force has got a very flexible approach is something that I'm very keen on. I want to see this done in a voluntary way, not a prescriptive legal way, and I think the task force work has given us a really good platform for going forward. The benefits I see to the industry are that you will get more community benefits. We will win the politics of renewables. You will have an easier time in planning because people will go, yeah, we understand this better. We see why it's happening. And that can change the whole approach that we see in the UK. And maybe I'm over-optimistic, maybe I'm naively optimistic. But I think unless we take these initiatives, we'll be on the back foot. I want us to be on the front foot, because we saw with Rosie, you've got an industry to be very proud of.
Thanks for your question, Merlin, and your response, Secretary of State. So, gentleman in the middle, could tell us in a nice loud voice who you are, please?
I'm Angus MacDonald. For big development projects, we need funding, and the experience we've had as a developer is we cannot get the utilities support us. Effectively, they're on a strike. They don't want to invest in major electricity products in the UK. And international investors cite political risk in all the times we've engaged with them. So funding of big projects is a big issue for us.
I think some utilities are still investing, but it's common knowledge that their balance sheets have had a tough time, and therefore they are, in the way that they've been in the past, they're less the main way to investment. The political risks you talk about, something I touched on in my speech in the run-up to general election, it's almost inherent in the parliamentary timetable. It needn't be, actually, if all political parties made their positions clearer and I think took the right path. But there is that. And I try my best to reduce that political risk, reaching out to other parties and trying to create frameworks, whether in the domestic law and the European law, that give people confidence through parliaments and beyond parliaments. Because yours is a long-term set of investments, and therefore finance won't come if it can't be short of that. It's one of the reasons why we design the contracts for difference as a private law contract, which has been very attractive to global investors. So I understand what you say. The only thing I would point to is that we still are seeing investment coming. When I've gone around the world and as part of the work that we do in government to bang the drum for the UK industrial renewables industries opportunities, I do hear very positive voices from around the world about the opportunities here. Can we do more? We always want to do more. The Green Investment Bank is something that we've done to try to facilitate that and to help guide people and hold people's hand towards making that final investment decision. But we know that there are those other issues, and that's why we need to win the politics of renewables.
Thank you. Julian Brown, for the benefit of anybody that doesn't know, is our chairman of Renewable UK and country director for Arriva Wind. Your question to the Secretary of State, please.
Thank you, Mary. Secretary of State, first of all, allow me to add my thanks for what was a very powerful message, and of course, it was reassuring for us all to hear the level of support we have from yourself and belief in the journey that we are on. I wanted to ask you a piece of advice. I mean, as an industry, we're determinedly building a vision around a renewable-based economy and playing an increasingly significant role in the energy mix. What can we do, and what would you advise us to do more of as an industry to help raise the quality of the energy debate in the general public, that's not sort of contaminated or damaged by some of the unhelpful myths spread by the mainstream media? What can we do to really raise that quality of debate so that the challenges, the consequences, the compromises that we have to make in making the energy portfolio, that we have a better quality debate?
Well, thank you very much for that question. I mean, at a very basic level, it's realising that there is an issue that we have to keep winning the argument. Now, that might sound obvious, but it actually needs you. There's one disadvantage about being a politician, that actually not everybody likes us or indeed trusts us. So I don't know if you've noticed that. And therefore, sometimes we can say it till we're blue in the face, but there'll be, the way people hear it is not through the lens of me on their doorstep all the time, although I knock on doors in my constituency. It's through the media. and the media don't always report it verbatim and in a fair and balanced way. And therefore, I need other players. We need the industry. We need your employees. We need your investors. We need the communities that you've invested in. I mean, when I go around and visit onshore wind farms, and I talk to the local people who are employed there, the businesses who've got contracts there, the local councillors there, I tend to find people really strongly supportive. Where are those voices getting heard? We've got to bring them and amplify them and get the microphone under their noses. And that's a collective effort. And in many ways, you at the grassroots, with your individual wind farms, your individual offshore wind farms, and your individual factories, and whatever it may be, you're better placed to get that voice heard in that local area. I could rehearse the arguments I made in my speech about costs and security and climate change and so on. They're the sort of intellectual arguments. But it's about bringing forward what actually is happening out there, rather than this, frankly, completely incorrect picture that is painted.
Thank you. I'm coming to Seb Kennedy, but is there anybody else wanting to... Can I direct a microphone? Okay, well, we can pass it straight across to you, David. There's two more over here. I'm coming to the lady in the blue. So you're third. Right. Seb.
Hi, Secretary of State's Seb Kennedy, Renews. A year ago, I asked you at the Renewable UK conference in Birmingham about Eric Pickle's interventions in the planning regime, and you were very relaxed when you brushed it aside as not being a big deal and not being anything to worry about, despite the clear and mounting evidence that he was on a political crusade against onshore wind turbines. But why did you not decide to denounce his actions sooner? And why did you wait until the Liberal Democrats party conference in the autumn this year before deciding to make the statement that his actions amount to an abuse of ministerial power?
Because in a coalition, you make an agreement on a policy change, and you look to see how that agreement is kept to and how it is implemented. And you have to treat colleagues with respect. They may be from a different party. You're working together. And by and large, actually, I think this coalition has done a blimmin' good job on a whole series of things, including renewables. So in order to make sure that you operate as a coherent, disciplined government, you do often have to voice your concerns in private, not always in public. And you also have to give people a chance to show how they are going to respond to agreements that have been made. And I think that's actually the right way about doing business of government. But it comes to a point when you say, well, you've had your chance, and we can be critical. And, Conservatives have been critical of us in areas, we've been critical of them in areas. That's what you would expect in a coalition government. That is my answer. We responded not just to your question last year, but to many people in the industry warning us that there was this growing problem. And I am now being very clear in my position on that. I hope this will change. It needs to change. It must change.
Do you regret not acting sooner?
No.
Secretary of State David Blunt, Gamosa Wind. First of all, Maria, great film. Rosie, well done. You're a star.
Isn't she fantastic?
Yeah, and Secretary of State, thank you again for the very powerful message. I'm not going to ask you about politics this time. Ofgem's latest calculation is we've got a margin of about 4 or 4.1% between maximum generation capacity and maximum demand. We're all working our socks off here to deliver more renewable energy as quickly as we can. Feels a bit like pushing water uphill sometimes, given planning constraints and some of the factors that you alluded to in your speech. Just wondered if you'd like to reflect a little bit on how the UK can improve that margin, because the last thing you or we want to see is brownouts. Thanks.
There's a short, medium and long-term answer to that. The short term is that the margin this winter won't be 4.1%. The margin will be over 6%. that is significantly above our reliability standard. And the reason it's 6% and not the 4.1% you quoted was because that was the figure before what we call the supplementary balancing reserve measures have been implemented, which Ofgem regulate National Grid to do, and with our agreement they do, and they have now got a number of power stations out of the market in reserve to bring on when they need to. That means our margin is 6.1. But in reality, our margin is probably better than that, because there are other balancing measures that National Grid can take at any one time, and there are other contingency measures that we hold on which are not baked into those numbers. And just to give you one example, those numbers assume that the interconnectors that we have with France, with Ireland, with and the Netherlands would produce a net nil impact on our electricity supplies. And all the evidence over quite a number of years is if the prices are higher in the UK, the electricity flows. So in all our scenarios, that's yet another contingency, and there are others. So it's one of the reasons why I'm rather more comfortable than some newspaper editors appear to be. I can't think why they take their view, than about the margins this winter. We also look to 15-16 and the supplementary balancing reserve measures, which, by the way, we've been planning for 3 years, and they're using powers in the 1989 Electricity Act. National Grid will prepare supplementary balancing reserve measures for 15-16. Thereafter, obviously, the next Secretary of State may have a view on, but we've got the capacity market towards the end of this decade, when more coal power stations come offline, and we'll have some more capacity issues. Long term, in the 2020s, when we see 8 of the 9 nuclear power stations come offline, more coals come offline, that's where the major investment needs to continue to be. We've dramatically increased investment in the last few years. The pipeline of investment in energy is bigger than the rest of Britain's infrastructure investments combined. You add it, water, transport, telecoms, and all the rest of it together, energy in the next few years is going to be bigger than all of that. That's not just wishful thinking. That's what people are planning and what we are hoping to and believe will come online. So that's the long-term solution to the capacity issue. But inevitably, you can't go from where we are today and jump to that. You need all these other things coming on board as well. So we have a short, medium, and long-term plan.
Thank you. Right, I'm coming to the lady in blue over this, going to tell us her name in a minute, and we've then possibly got time for just one more.
I think they're saying no.
Oh, I thought we had till 11:30. 5 minutes. 5 minutes? Oh, sorry, I've got a different timetable. One more, okay.
The private office is getting a bit antsy.
I'm so sorry, Martin. We can only do the one. And now, because of signals, I have to ask you to try and be brief, please.
No problem. Hi, good morning, Secretary of State, and good morning, Maria. Thank you both for your very passionate speeches this morning. My name's Jessica Mills-Davis, and I'm from Clean Energy Pipeline. I've got 2 questions. One is related to politics, the other one slightly less so. My first question is, the 2030 targets that were adopted by the European Council recently, do you think they were strong enough for renewable energy and energy efficiency? And then my second question is, what do you think needs to be done to build a UK offshore wind manufacturing industry in the UK?
Thank you for those questions.
Well, the last question first. Vince Cable and I published, I forget now how many months ago, a little while ago, an offshore wind industry strategy, which covered all the different aspects of it, whether it was finance, manufacturing, skills, and so on. And that's work that it's not a document that doesn't get updated within government. It gets worked on all the time, and there's a lot of work in there that we have to deliver. And whether it's working with Siemens AB Ports, Vestas, or a number of other companies, we work with them. We have of course the Offshore Wind Programme Board, the UK Offshore Wind Industry Council. Publications like this are all part of a pretty comprehensive approach to building that offshore wind supply chain. In terms of the 2030 targets and renewables and energy efficiency, I mean, there was debate in the Green Growth Group that I established about what mix of targets. Should we have one target? Should we have 3 targets? Should they be binding? What levels should they be? We had a huge debate over about 18 months about what that should be. The most important target has to be the greenhouse gas emission reduction target. That drives everything. That's the one target that's going to be debated about at the UN talks, the UNFCCC climate change talks. And so that's why that is, centre point. It also fits with the UK's technology neutral approach for the 2020s. We've had renewable energy targets for 2020, but increasingly we need to see low carbon technologies competing. I've made no secret of that. I think that is the right thing to do. But when you look at that, our analysis showed that the 40% greenhouse gas reduction target will stimulate about 30% growth, 30% of renewables. Across the whole of Europe. So itself is a big stimulant without even having a specific target. But in discussions with the Germans, they were keen to have a very clear, and the Danes, very clear signal to industry. So we have this EU-wide renewables target of 27%, which I think underpins the impact of the greenhouse gas target. So I think those are strong. On energy efficiency, in 2020 we didn't have a binding target, we had an indicative target. We've got an indicative target this time.
Was there a comment about the manufacturing for offshore?
Well, I thought I dealt with that the strategy.
Okay. In that case, please, the Secretary of State now has to dash, but please don't anybody else go. I've just got 2 very, very brief announcements to say before you all leave the room. But as the Secretary of State does take his leave, I'm sure you would want to join me in thanking him once again for that very passionate speech. Now, as members of the media will have heard the Secretary of State's most welcome announcements around the MHI Vestas offshore wind decision and also the Chin review, immediately following this session, MHI Vestas Offshore Wind are going to be holding a press conference in Central 3. That's not open to everybody. But following that, from 11:40, Matthew Knight and Ray Thompson of Siemens, together with our own chairman, Julian Brown, and Ellen Williams of DEC, are going to answer any questions, they'll attempt them anyway, questions any of you have on the Chin review, and that is going to be open to all delegates, and it's also in Central 3. For the rest of us, we now move into a break. Sessions resume at 11:45 sharp across all 4 streams, so we're back into the streams. I very much hope to see many of you tonight at the gala dinner. For those I shan't see this evening, I'd like to say a big thank you for attending today and for your participation and for just generally supporting this annual flagship event. It finishes by asking for a clap for the Secretary of State, but we've already done that, so thanks very much, and I look forward to seeing you all this evening. Have a great day. Thank you.